Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how, or the newspaper analysis from the civil service examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 23rd September 2023. The important topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on the screen, and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let us begin our today's session. This topic has appeared at page number 12 in today's The Hindu Delhi edition. And as you can see from the heading of this topic, it talks about the Quad ministers hold talks on the rule-based order as well as UN reforms. To understand this particular topic, obviously we need to understand the basics, that what is the Quad grouping, what are the challenges in UN reforms, what is the rule-based order, and etc. things. If you go by the detailed immediate context of this topic, recently there was a meeting between the Quad members. Now, Quad grouping consists of four countries, that is India, Australia, Japan, as well as US. If you map these countries, you will find that this region specifically belongs to the Indo-Pacific group, right? Because India is from the Indian Ocean, Australia borders Indian Ocean as well as Pacific Ocean, Japan is in Pacific, and US also borders the Pacific Ocean. So this is basically the Indo-Pacific group, right? So in this particular meeting, they came up with several dimensions, several talks on different topics. For example, they talked about free and open Indo-Pacific region. They also talked about the UN Charter and its important principles. And that is why if you have to mark this particular news, it will come under General Studies Mains Paper 2 in the section of International Relations. Now when you will read this particular news, you will find several sub-themes within this particular topic. Few of the themes we have talked in the context. For example, we talked about the UNSC reforms. So these members, especially India and Japan, believe that UNSC, that is United Nations Security Council, requires certain reforms. The second important issue which they have talked about is the peace and security of the Indo-Pacific region. Right? The third topic which they have talked about is the maritime security. The fourth topic they have talked about is the reviving of the Black Sea Green Initiative. And fifth topic which they have talked about is the disaster vulnerability as well as preparedness of this particular region. So that means all these topics, if we have to divide as per the UPSC syllabus, some of the topics forms the part of General Studies Mains Paper 2, that is International Relations sections. Some of the topics form the part of General Studies Mains Paper 3, having the subsections of disaster management as well as the security, right? So in this, so that is why in today's session we will be dealing with few of these topics. If we have to talk about the Indo-Pacific region, then just in the previous DNS, which was dated 8th September 2023, I have discussed in detail about the importance, significance, concerns and issues as well as the way ahead with regard to the Indo-Pacific region. So that is why you are requested to go back to the DNS dated 8th September 2023 in order to understand the geopolitics of Indo-Pacific region as a whole. So that is why in today's session, obviously we will not be dealing with this part. In today's session, what will we be dealing with is, one is the UNSC reforms, because this is the mega theme of this particular talk. Also, we will talk about the disaster vulnerability of this Quad members, because Indo-Pacific region again is one of the most vulnerable regions when it comes to the natural disasters. So that means this topic we will be dealing from General Studies Mains Paper 2 perspective. This theme we will be dealing from the General Studies Mains Paper 3 perspective. Also, we will be dealing with the mapping sections of the Black Sea, right? Now, this Quad grouping is very famous and we already are aware about the important members of this Quad grouping, that is India, Australia, US and Japan. Further, the relevancy of this topic can also be gauged through the previous year question which was asked in UPSC 2020. Now read this question carefully. The question said that Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, that is Quad, is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance in the present times. Discuss. This was a long question that is of 250 words. So, in this very regard, in today's session, we are going to discuss the disaster vulnerability profile of this very particular region. That why is it so important to focus on the disaster relief by these squad members? Let us look at the disaster profile or the vulnerability of this particular region. Now, first we will look at the geological vulnerability. We all understand that this particular region, that is Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, which collectively is known as Indo-Pacific region, is geologically very active because of frequent tectonic movements. For example, at the entire coast of Pacific, we understand that there is a convergence which is going on. For example, here the convergence is between the Pacific plate as well as the South American plate. Similarly, in this particular region, the convergence is between the Pacific plate and North American plate. Here, Pacific plate is getting converged with the Eurasian plate, and this is the convergence zone of Pacific and Indo-Australian plate. In addition to this, there are several minor plates also, for example, Philippines plate, etc. So because of this tectonically active region, there are high chances of several disasters, for example, earthquakes, tsunami, and volcanism. The next important dimension of this disaster is from the climatology perspective. Now, in the backdrop of rising anthropogenic activities as well as greenhouse gas emissions, we understand that climate change is a reality and it is impacting various ecosystems across the world. For example, this particular region, that is Indo-Pacific region, is experiencing rise in sea levels, which in turn increases the intensity of floods in various regions. Similarly, this particular region is also being impacted by high intensity atmo-oceanic disasters, for example, El Nino as well as La Nina. Now, what do we exactly mean by El Nino? El Nino basically refers to the warming up of the water on the eastern coast of Pacific, which in turn alters the thermal as well as pressure conditions across the Pacific. And this alteration of thermal and pressure conditions across the Pacific region has regional as well as global impacts. For example, during El Nino times, it is normally witnessed that India faces droughts. So that is why droughts is also one of the biggest disasters of this region. The next important hazard from this particular region, which is increased in recent times, are the marine heat waves. If we have to understand what are marine heat waves, it is basically the heat waves in the maritime areas. That is, when there is excessive warming of the oceanic water and in the upper atmosphere there is a high pressure region, whatever convection takes place from these warm waters gets entrapped because of the anticyclonic conditions prevailing over and above them, and that is why these heat waves get trapped in this particular location and then they move towards the direction of the prevailing winds. But these marine heat waves have a long term as well as short term impacts on the coastal climate of countries like US. Further, because of the alteration in the behavior of the jet streams, we are also witnessing the phenomena of polar vortex. Now, the polar vortex is basically the situation whereby the cold waves, which earlier were entrapped in the north, travels towards south in the US and brings the cold conditions to the subtropical as well as tropical USA. So these are the various disasters, that is earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanisms, rise in sea level, floods, droughts, El Nino and La Nina, marine heat waves, polar vortex, and then you can think about other disasters as well. And because of this high vulnerability of the disasters in this Indo-Pacific region, the Quad members have joined hands together to provide and work for the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and response work in this particular region. But then there are certain challenges as well. Let us have a look in this perspective also. The first and the foremost challenge is of funding. Now, this funding issue almost appears every time whenever we think about mitigating the climate change impacts. The reason is that who will share the responsibility? Will it be equally shared among all the members? Or here also we will follow the principle of shared responsibility based on the principles of equity. In the recent times, we have seen the fluctuating stance of one of the most important members of Quad, that is USA, in the context of climate change. The second important challenge is the developmental aspirations of all the countries in this particular region. For example, India has a strong population to feed. India also have ambitions, aspirations as far as its socio-economic development is concerned. So obviously there will be certain limits to the environment friendly policies in order to achieve the economic objectives. So now, how to balance economy and environment? This is a bigger question. The next challenge is China. Now, because China is out of this Quad grouping, but we all know that China is one of the most dominant player in this particular region, that is Indo-Pacific. So whatever humanitarian assistance programs are to be taken in this particular region, we have to think that whether those will be feasible or not without the active support and participation of China. Further, this region is very much ecologically sensitive. We have the presence of corals, fishes, planktons, etc. And this high ecological sensitivity, in a way, limits our measures to tackle the climate change. For example, now we cannot take structural measures in the Indian as well as Pacific Ocean to combat cyclonic rainfall or earthquakes. The next challenge is of research and development. For example, again, India lacks the finances in order to support high-tech research and development program in order to understand all these disasters. And the last but not the least challenge is the tropical weather in itself. Now, tropical weathers are very complex and erratic. For example, till now, despite having several studies by almost all the countries, we are not able to understand the true mechanism of Indian monsoon. We have a well-defined theory for the formation of temperate cyclones, but when it comes to tropical cyclones, still we do not understand it fully. So these are certain challenges which need to be tackled by all the members of this Quad grouping, that is Australia, US, Japan and India. Now coming to the second important theme of this news, that is UNSC reforms, United Nations Security Council reforms. We will discuss that what is UNSC, its structure, why UNSC reforms are needed and what are the specific areas where UNSC reforms are needed, and then we'll discuss in the end that what is the case for India's permanent membership stake at United Nations. First of all, we must know that UNSC stands for United Nations Security Council, and this is a principal crisis management body and it has the power to issue binding obligations. Now, this word is important, binding obligations on all the members of the United Nations. It has three core roles. First is ensuring the international peace and security. Second is UNSC has its role in selection and appointment of the new members to the United Nations. It gives its recommendation to the General Assembly of the United Nations. And third is any change in the UN Charter or any modification in the UN Charter must be approved by the United Nations Security Council. And when we talk about the UNSC, the most important thing is the P5 group. Now, what is P5? We'll discuss it. UNSC has two types of members. One are the permanent members and other are the non-permanent members. Now there are five permanent members which are known as P5, that is permanent 5. Now these members, as the name signifies, are permanent in nature. China, France, Russia, UK and USA. Now these five countries are permanent members, and the most special thing about permanent members are that they have a veto power. Now veto power means that on any issue which is being debated in UNSC, these countries have the veto power. For example, let's say if country A attacks the country B and UNSC decides to sanction the country A, and just one country out of these five countries votes against this sanction, that sanction cannot be imposed on it because that particular country has vetoed it. But the problem is that this veto power is only available to these five countries. The next are the non-permanent members, which are 10 in number, and they are appointed on rotation basis, giving adequate representation on geographical terms. That means all the continents will be given adequate representation. But this geographical representation is restricted only to the non-permanent membership and not to the permanent membership. Now, there are certain issues and challenges in which UN is lacking, and that is why we need reforms in certain areas. Now, first of all, if you closely analyze that these are the five permanent members, and out of these, just look USA, UK, and Russia, and the erstwhile, which was known as Soviet Union in the post World War II era, were the major powers. And that is why this permanent membership symbolizes the World War II period, post World War II period. And that is why there is a power disbalance among these five countries and the other complete world. But now if we talk about the present situation, that geopolitical situation has changed a lot. Now country like India is emerging with its full might. Now there is a huge socio-economic and cultural importance of the countries of Africa. For example, Japan is one of the most industrialized nations of not only Asia but of the whole world. Similarly, Brazil has also its importance at the global geopolitical level. So the point is that presently the geopolitical situation has changed a lot since World War II, and that is why there must be a reform and UN must do away with this restricted five permanent member formula. The second important thing is that if you closely again understand this membership, only one country, that is China, is from Asia, right? So there is inequitable representation. Europe is overrepresented because Europe as a continent is very small and it supports a very minuscule share of world population. But if you see the countries, we have France and UK from Europe. Then Asia, we have discussed, is underrepresented because Asia is a very huge continent, but we have just one representative, that is China. And Africa and South America, so large continents, but they have zero representation. The third major issue is of legitimacy and credibility, the latest example being the Russian-Ukraine war. In the past also there have been several invasions, for example in Libya, in Egypt, in Iraq, Syria, Yemen. So there have been continuous invasions going on across the world, but UNSC has failed to stop those invasions and take the necessary steps. That is why in present times UNSC face the crisis of legitimacy and credibility. The north-south divide is the continuation of this very issue, because if you divide the world into two halves, that is north and south, most of the countries, for example China, France, Russia, UK and USA, all these countries are in the north. Then the latest issue is that present times are witnessing the emerging new issues to which UNSC is completely new. For example, in present times, due to globalization, economic interdependence is rising. Environmental degradation has become one of the most widespread threatening phenomena for the entire humanity. And moreover, the transnational threats, for example, terrorism, is becoming highly modified. Now we have cyber attacks. Now the organized crime is becoming high tech. So presently, UNSC is not able to cater all these emerging issues. And the last issue is the relationship between the Security Council and General Assembly of the United Nations. There have been a lack of coordination and continuous friction among these two parts. So these are the broader reforms which are needed in UNSC. Now we will discuss the case for India's permanent membership because India is one of the torchbearer to reform the UNSC. So whenever we have to discuss the case for some country, we must look the geopolitical significance of that particular country. And that is why we will analyze the geopolitical significance of India also in this regard. First of all, India has around 1/6 of the global population. That means the demographic power is huge with India. Second is India is the largest democracy of the world, and that is why it is believed that India's entry into UNSC will provide UNSC with the required democratic values. For example, we all are aware about the hardcore geopolitical stance of countries like USA, Russia, and China. If India enters into the permanent five grouping, then it is believed that India will stand for those countries who are not very strong and thereby will put their democratic principles and values into UNSC. Next comes the economic might. Now, factually, India was the fifth largest economy in 2019, and as far as the purchasing power parity is concerned, India ranks third globally. So that means that India is among the top five economic powers. Now come military. India is a responsible nuclear power, being the third largest military spender and one of the largest standing armies. Further, India's contribution to the United Nations is also very huge. India is the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operations, which majorly is deployed in the countries of Africa. So that means that India's contribution to United Nations is also very huge. First, at the geopolitical scale also, the latest example again being the Russian-Ukrainian war. India has active participation in the global geopolitics. Further, India is also one of the four members. The grouping is known as G4 members. India is a member along with Brazil, Germany, and Japan. And the major goal of G4 grouping is to reform the United Nations Security Council, and all these countries support each other's bid for the permanent membership in the UNSC. This topic has appeared at page number 8 in today's The Hindu Daily edition. The topic reads India and the Great Power Contest in West Asia. So this topic is again important from the General Studies Mains Paper 2 perspective, that is the IR, International Relations, because it specifically mentions that the relations between India and regional groupings as well as extended neighborhood are important. The immediate context in which this topic has been written is that recently it has been witnessed that USA is engaging in the West Asian geopolitics in a huge manner. The context of this article also mentions about the launch of US-backed infrastructure project to connect India, West Asia and Europe with shipping lanes, rail networks, pipelines, data cables, etc. So as far as this point is concerned, we had discussed this in the DNS dated 12th September 2023, whereby we discussed the launch of West Asia Economic Corridor. So those people who haven't seen this DNS or those who want to revise this particular topic from the prelims perspective are requested to go back to the DNS dated 12th September 2023, whereby I have discussed in detail about this India, Middle East, Europe corridor. However, coming to today's topic, when we have to discuss about the power tussle going on the West Asian region, the two major powers which this article talks about is the US and China. And that is why this rivalry of US and China gives a strong opportunity for India to increase its stronghold in this particular region. Now, why do we have to increase our footprint in this region? There has to be some advantages, some significance which West Asian region provides to us. So that is why in today's session we will be looking at the importance of the West Asian region for India and the important dynamics of the bilateral relation between India and the West Asian region as a whole. There are several areas of cooperation as well as mutual friendship which we should be aware about. The most important area of cooperation is the oil and gas. The West Asian countries as well as the North African countries contribute over 60% of India's total imports of crude oil and more than 85% of the India's LNG requirements. Among all these countries, Iraq is the largest supplier of crude oil to India. Before Iraq, Saudi Arabia was the largest supplier. But an important development has taken place in this very region, that because of the failure of the nuclear deal and consequent imposition of sanctions by US on Iran, the share of Iran's contribution to the India's oil needs has considerably reduced. And because of this, there has been a significant geopolitical turn in the India's foreign policies also. Nevertheless, India is still dependent on West Asian countries for its oil and gas requirements. Then the second important aspect comes the Indian diaspora which is living in the West Asian countries. And around 10 million Indians are living in the West Asian countries. As per the 2019 data, the Saudi Arabia constitutes the major share of Indian diaspora, followed by United Arab Emirates and then Kuwait. Now here again you should understand that the diaspora, despite the fact is in the foreign countries, still India is accountable for their protection. India collaborates with all those countries where there is a significant proportion of Indians living over there. And similarly, other countries also cooperate with India in order to protect their own citizens who are living in India. Now, diaspora has a very strong potential in the soft diplomacy. Diasporas are therefore called as unofficial ambassadors of any country. The third important aspect comes the remittances, which is a natural outcome of high diaspora living in West Asian countries. If we are having so much huge amount of people living in foreign country, then obviously they will be sending back the remittances to their family, loved ones, dear ones, or friends who are living in India. That is why, according to the World Bank report in the year 2020, India received around $83 billion in remittances, which was the highest in the world. And out of all these remittances, the majority of these remittances were from the West Asian Indian diaspora. As far as the country-wise specific remittances are concerned, as per that report, India received the largest remittance from the UAE. Further, the importance of these remittances for a national economy can be understood by a simple fact that these remittances account for 3% of India's total GDP. Then comes the trade part. Now, by analyzing this particular graph, you can understand the tremendous potential in trade which India shares with the West Asian countries. For example, with UAE, India's trade is of the tune of around 60,000 million US dollars. Then comes the Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and almost with all the countries in West Asia, there is a very strong trade based cooperation, and India has huge interest in saving that trade. And in this very line, the next important component is related to the investment. The UAE India Infrastructure Investment Fund has pledged to invest around 75 billion US dollars in India's infrastructure projects like roadways, railways, airways, etc. Similarly, Saudi Arabia has also invested around $100 billion in India in sectors like petrochemicals, infrastructure, manufacturing, refining, and mining. And as for the latest development is concerned, UAE has again announced an investment of $7 billion in the food corridors which are to be developed in India. And last comes the foreign policies. We all are aware about the Look West policy of India, which is specifically focusing towards the Gulf countries. And India's Look West policy is complementary to the West Asian countries' Look East policy because we are to their east and they are to our west. So that is why both the policies are complementary to each other. This topic has appeared at page number 13 and the topic reads Ukraine hits Russia's Black Sea fleet base in Crimea. Now obviously this topic is in the context of the long standing and ongoing issue between Russia as well as Ukraine. However, from the examinations perspective, in today's session, we will be dealing with the Plim's pointer regarding to the map location of the Black Sea. Now, if you closely look the map, Black Sea is bordered by 6 countries. First, Ukraine. Second, Russia. Third, Georgia. Fourth, Turkey. Fifth, Bulgaria. And sixth, Romania. If you closely look at this specific area, that is Moldova, though when you look at the world map, it might appear that it touches the Black Sea, but in reality, it does not. Further, along with the Black Sea, there are some other important seas as well. For example, the Sea of Azov, Sea of Marmara, and the Aegean Sea. Now, all these seas are interconnected through the straits, and these straits are also important. The Sea of Azov and the Black Sea is connected through a strait known as the Strait of Kerch. Similarly, the strait between the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara is known as the Strait of Bosporus. Further, the Snake Islands is also lying in the Black Sea, which lies near the Danube Delta. Now, Danube is an important river in this particular region, and this Snake Island is being controlled by which country? Ukraine. So, these are the key facts related to the Black Sea, Snake Islands, Sea of Azov, and some important straits in this particular area. There can be a question in prelim examination from this very important region.